If you have questions about Erika Kirk and JD Vance's infamous hug, you're not alone. There's very good reasons that people can't look away. I think the gossip reveals deeper truths. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. It was a hug that sent 1,000 divorce lawyers' hearts aflutter. JD Vance and Erika Kirk should have stuck to that awkward Christian side hug. At a recent Turning Point USA event in Mississippi, the vice president and the widow of Charlie Kirk got tongues wagging with, well, this. I don't think he's touched his actual wife, Usha Vance, like that since, how old is their youngest kid again? Erika's comments made it even worse.
No one will ever replace my husband. No. But I do see some similarities of my husband in JD and Vice President JD Vance. I do.
You were gossiping about it. I was gossiping about it. Everyone was gossiping about it.
Usha? That's your man? That's your man right there?
Not JD out here hugging Erika Kirk for longer than he's maintained eye contact with his wife. Erika is in good hands. Except those hands just happen to be wrapped around her hips.
The first thing that anyone in my line of work would notice is that at the moment that she goes to hug him, we see her right shoulder move upwards like this into the hug. When those shoulders come up, it indicates that they're fully immersed in this positive experience and they're fully taking it in.
I mean, this is obviously AI, but I mean, with the current state of the whole situation, everything that's going on, we couldn't really put this past them at this point. You know what I mean?
One user posted a meme of the second lady, Mrs. Vance, with the caption, "When you watch your husband get handsy with a single mom in leather pants, but you can't make him sleep on the couch, cause he'll F that too."
Okay, that's pretty funny. The AI of her standing on Charlie's coffin and kissing the top of JD's head. Look, I'm not here to scold anybody about gossiping about this. Those two do not deserve your pity. Both Erika and JD have built their entire careers on sticking their nose into other people's business. If you don't get married young and have a bunch of babies, JD is going to call you a miserable cat lady. Erika has a career and 2 college degrees, but she and her late husband still wanted you to be a submissive housewife.
Be that biblical wife that you're supposed to be for him.
So let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America.
I love submitting to Charlie because he's a phenomenal leader.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made.
To all the men watching around the world, accept Charlie's challenge and embrace true manhood.
They feel like a couple because they're both super creepy. We at Standing Room Only can't say that there's anything going on between these two. What we do know is that JD's actual marriage is an increasingly poor fit for his political brand. He wants to run for president with blood and soil nationalism. He's also all about those traditional gender roles. But he's married to an increasingly sad-looking Usha who is not white and is nobody's idea of a trad wife.
In a dream world, eventually I'll be able to live in my home and kind of continue my career.
For MAGA, a politician's wife is an important part of establishing his reputation as a real man. JD has a well-financed machine backing him. They're going to want a really good return on that investment. He would be easier to market to the MAGA base if he was married to someone who looked like Erika and not Usha. Plus, Erika has been training to be a political wife for years. She was a pageant queen. She even had a stint on a Bravo show called Summer House. You see, at the same event that Erika and JD hugged, JD also threw Usha under the bus after somebody asked him about being married to a Hindu.
Do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved in by church? Yeah, I honestly do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way.
He's defensive, he's angry, he knows that this is a problem for him. The MAGA audience ate it up when JD said that they were raising their kids to be Christians.
we've decided to raise our kids Christian. They go to a Christian school. Our 8-year-old did his first communion about a year ago. That's the way that we have come to our arrangement. But thank you.
It was a real moment of disrespect for his wife and her parents, and that's probably why the crowd liked it. They love it when JD insults his Indian American family. It's part of his noxious shtick. While never coming right out and saying so, he's made it clear that he sees the U.S. as a nation for and by white people.
If you go back to the 1920s, the United States passed an Immigration Reform Act that effectively cut down immigration to close to zero for 40 years in this country. And what happened over those 40 years? The many, many people who had come from many different foreign countries and different foreign cultures, they assimilated into American culture.
It is totally reasonable and acceptable for American citizens to look at their next door neighbors and say, I want to live next to people who I have something in common with.
My constituents are saying these things are happening. I mean,
but there's
just
no
yesterday,
evidence.
A video came out of a migrant 30 miles away eating a cat.
There's absolutely no evidence to even remotely suggest that immigrants are eating pets.
Usha's family came from India. Now JD says he wants to restrict most, if not all, immigration from that country. That's incoherent. To us, it's racist as fuck. To the MAGA base, they're like, then why are you married to her? JD is also catering to radicalized young men, and those guys are all about traditional marriage and female submission. Usha did leave her career as a high-powered attorney to be the second lady, but as we covered in our last video about this, she is not happy about it. I'll talk about this more during Pass the Mic with my guest, Soraya Chemaly. Whatever you think of these rumors, they do reflect a deeper reality. JD Vance is a soulless striver who will sell off anything if he thought it would give him more power. We don't have to ask if he would betray his wife and kids. He does so every day. His vision of America is one that has no room for them in it. The gossip, though, is not advantageous for either Erika or JD at this moment. After all, Charlie Kirk died just a few months ago. And murder is bad, of course, but let's face it, their efforts at cleaning this up are pretty funny. JD is resorting to the one trick he has, which is phony umbrage. He was all fake mad on X, calling people disgusting for gossiping. He even said he'll love and support Usha because she's his wife. Not because he wants to, it sounds like, but because he has to. Erika has been hustling even harder to put this to bed. She even did a full hour with Jesse Waters on Fox News, which is almost as bad as being married to Charlie Kirk, sorry.
Introducing the Vice President tonight, JD Vance. He's really been there for you.
He's a blessing. Him and Usha. But the nights are the hardest, being in a bed by yourself. People would say, if you can't sleep, take something to sleep. The Lord has let me sleep just fine. But if the Lord gave him an option to return back to earth, and if the Lord said, this is what your death is going to be the catalyst for, do you want to go back and exchange it? He'd say no.
What? Her tone is supposed to convey I'm deeply grieving, but she's like, yeah, I'm happy to sleep alone, it's fine. This is a woman who knows how to be on camera. You would think that she knows how this looks. This is why rubbing JD's head in public was so odd. Anyway, it's doubtful that these efforts at cleanup will work. The MAGA base should know this better than anyone because all they do is traffic in gossip and innuendo. That stuff gets people's attention way more than all that boring policy talk. Everyone with two eyes can see that JD is in a pickle. He picked his wife in his youth. He likely had no idea what his future would hold. Now he's part of a movement that gobbles down far-right propaganda. It's all about a homeland populated only by strong-jawed Aryan men and their blonde housewives. If JD doesn't like all this chatter about Erika, he should take a beat and ask himself, why is it so easy for people to believe these rumors? My guest today is Soraya Chemaly. She has a new book out called All We Want Is Everything, and it's about fighting male supremacy. Feminist author, journalist.
Activist.
Name it all.
You know, it's all the same thing at this point.
I really am glad to speak about J.D. Vance, Erika Kirk, Usha Vance, and why people are gossiping about this big hug.
Yes.
Because your book is about fighting male supremacy.
It is.
And I think one reason people are fascinated with Erika Kirk as a figure is she is the embodiment of female complicity with male supremacy. She's always talking about how she loves submitting to her husband and things like that. And I just want to ask you, because I'm forever asked by people, why are women complicit with this stuff? So I want to ask you, why do women do this?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this, you and I, for a long time. It's a never-ending fount of examples, right? And the reason that I'm writing this book about male supremacism is because it's a really great framework for understanding the role of male supremacy in all the other forms of supremacy, whether it's cis supremacy, het supremacy, white supremacy. And if you use patriarchy, a set of institutions, or gender equality, a set of outcomes, it's much harder to do that. With this idea of supremacy and having domination over others, the complexity is made very obvious. And I think this is a great example, right? Because a woman like Erika Kirk can leverage other forms of dominance, her whiteness, for example, to offset her gender subordination.
Yeah.
And there's a real dynamic, obviously, between that, particularly in white Christian nationalist culture and belief systems. And so it makes sense for her to basically, in an older fashioned term, patriarchy trade. What do I need to give up to gain security or safety or status? And that's kind of the mechanism. The other thing, too, that I think is interesting is that her version of white femininity, submissive femininity, is necessary and part of benevolent sexism, which is kind of geared towards providing and protecting for women, keeping them safe in return for the right to have public power and to have intimate power, because that's really what we're talking about.
What's interesting is Charlie Kirk showed that they are two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely.
Because he and his wife would perform this whole thing where she was like this cared for, beloved housewife. But then he would go on college campuses and basically like dunk on young women.
Absolutely.
And he even said he said he loathes most white women because he saw them as traitors.
They don't conform.
Yeah.
They're not governable. They won't do what they're supposed to do.
And it's it's like super clear, like he was both.
Yeah, the rule-following women are taken care of in that language. They're like, we're going to take care of you. And the women who aren't rule-following are open season on those women. And you can hear it most vividly in his violent rhetoric against trans people, and his kind of more coded but similarly violent rhetoric against immigrants or black people in the society who don't conform to their place. But the flowery language, the lovely language, is really reserved for the women who go along.
Yeah, and so that gets to like the whole reason I think people are fascinated by this particular story, because a lot of it has to do with Usha Vance.
Yes.
Who, is Indian American and Hindu and won't convert.
Right.
Which is clearly like a sore spot for J.D. Vance, which he
and
openly
everyone
says.
apparently.
Yeah, apparently everybody. And so what is her kind of role in this, and how does it illustrate, the way that racism and sexism kind of work together?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, there's the cat fight. There has to be a fight between women that we can focus on, because women have to operate in their own sphere. They can't really operate in men's spheres. The idea of cross-gender competition or battles is not something this ideology wants to focus on, because they need people to be in separate spheres. And so they're pitted against each other. Whether they want to be or not, I have no idea what they want, right? But I also think what's interesting about her race, the complexity of her race, is that she's part of the Browning America that is not binary. right? Like I am ethnically ambiguous, kind of dusky brown lady, darker in the summer, lighter in the winter. People don't really know where to put me, how to deal with my like physical appearance. And she kind of is like that. She can be, if not white passing, she definitely has white privilege because she's adjacent to it.
She named herself Vance.
She named herself Vance, and she understands that. She's a very smart person, but at the same time, she's not completely white. She's just kind of white enough sometimes. And when she's Hindu, she's not white enough. If she were a Christian, she'd become more white, and it would move her along that spectrum, right? So she's provisionally white. And in this instance, I just think that while there's this comparison, there's also that ambiguity. And in his case, I think he's just clearly a man who thinks, even if they come, even if we come for people look like her, I will protect them. Yeah. It's that heteropatriarchal kind of, I have the power in my family, but I also now have the power in the society.
Yeah, he's kind of said as much, even during his RNC speech. He told the story about marrying an Indian American woman where he was like, well, we can assimilate.
Yeah, we can do it.
And it was kind of, the implication was that she was okay because she married.
That's right.
Into his family. And it's like, well, but then what about your in-laws?
It's
incoherent.
It's not. It's incoherent. There's no coherence to it. There's no logic to it. There's no rationality to it, you know, which is kind of funny and ironic given the whole ideology.
But you're really insightful on this, because one of the things, we were looking at clips of this, and we were watching the clip of it looked like an Indian American woman asked him about her Usha conversion, and that's how this all started. She looked big mad.
Yeah.
But he says during his answer that his children are being raised Christian, and the crowd went nuts.
They went nuts.
And I would ask you to reflect on that, because that's wild.
I mean, I think we're in this moment with this resurgent religious fanaticism that's conflated with the militant masculinity and the xenophobia and all the violence and hostility that we know is underlying everything happening, but is becoming more explicit. And so when you see Christians celebrating because Hindu children are going to be converted, it feels like you're living in another century, but you're not, you know?
You're just like, this is weird.
I know this because you and I have been part of secular communities for a very long time. And the secularism is actually on the rise despite all of this. So I think that's also interesting, right? That secularism is on the rise. But we still have to contend with this, because I think if you think of it as a Venn diagram, you have Christian nationalism, you have tech bro utopianism, you have all the circles, right? You have all of these really disparate groups that can come together. And one of the things that makes it possible is the idea of male supremacy, because operating within any of those groups is a gender hierarchy.
Almost above all else, is like the racism and the gender stuff is
absolutely,
like,
and they
construct
brings
Elon Musk together with Christian right people.
Absolutely, and you end up with the weirdest pairings of people. Like you just think, how is it, that Peter Thiel is having dinner maybe with the Claremont Institute people? I mean, this is just wild to see, But I think that understanding how white supremacy and male supremacy operate within each other and across to strengthen both, right? And even within fights against white supremacy, there's a gender hierarchy. But what's interesting about that is that, in fact, Black Lives Matter inverted that because it was led by Black queer women, right? Which was very different from the civil rights movement of the 60s, for example. And in other movements like climate and pick a movement, class, climate, whatever it is, we're kind of seeing a pushback against male dominance that was historically relevant. And I think that's causing not just widespread confusion, but internal problems and frictions, right? So in that dynamic between J.D. Vance and Usha Vance, there's clearly an idea that they have a private process, that they have privacy and that their intimate life is their intimate life, and that certainly there is an intimate inequality, right? That's really, she can have her faith and she can articulate the choice that the children have because in their private life they have equality. And somehow we're all supposed to pretend that that has nothing to do with public inequality, with advocating for all forms of inequality. And we're supposed to just kind of miraculously separate those two realms and go along with the framework, which is, well, what we're doing in private is really what we're doing in private. And I'm going to say these words over here for the crowd that's going to make them cheer.
Yeah.
And wink, wink, we all know I'm in charge.
It's a weird thing because it's like they want to have it both ways. Where on one hand she is he's like she has free will.
Yes.
They want to sell this idea that you can have a traditional marriage with a man in charge and a woman submitting, and yet somehow she is not. That the implications of that are not there, which is that she is not in charge of her life or a free person.
She doesn't have final decision-making power, is what it ends up consistently being, which I will add is kind of scary because like 47-48% of men under 30 believe that only men should have final decision-making power in relationships, which is a very high and kind of scary number. It climbed 5% since 2020.
But I do want to ask you then, because right before you showed up today, the news broke out that there is more Epstein file stuff, that there's all these emails that the House Democrats released that showed that Jeffrey Epstein was saying that Donald Trump knew about the girls, that he had some amount of complicity with this. The details are still a little unclear. The emails are a little coded. But that's what he's saying to some degree. One of the craziest things is, on one hand, Jeffrey Epstein, dead guy, so he's a little easier to do this to, is this huge monster.
Right.
And then Donald Trump's very obvious relationship with him just doesn't seem to matter.
Well, nothing seems to matter. I mean,
but
really
why?
and truly. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I wrote, as I always do, a too long Substack post on this issue of turning focusing sexual violence on monsters that perpetrate it instead of the institutions and culture that empower them to do it, sometimes for decades, right? I don't really care about Jeffrey Epstein, and ultimately not even about Donald Trump, who unfortunately is president. But if we cared about Epstein, if we cared about sexual violence, if we cared about the levels of predation that are so diffuse in the society, we wouldn't be here at all. Because after the grab him by the pussy tape, we should have seen the society stop. Yeah. And that's not what happened. And then after the more than 24 women came forward with detailed stories that were similar, we should have seen it grind to a halt. But the fact is, we don't care about that kind of predation.
And E. Jean Carroll won
her case. I mean, we just don't care. And that's a function of sexualized violence as a tool of male supremacist oppression in the home, in the street, in politics.
And the Epstein victims are a really good example of this. They were mostly white, not all.
Right.
But they were often working class girls that were easier for him to go after.
Low status, not protected, trafficked with no friction.
That's such an important part, because now we act like he committed this huge crime that everyone agrees with is a huge crime, but he got away with it for a long time, and Donald Trump continues to get away with being associated with him because, like you said, people don't care.
People don't care about the facts. And what's interesting to me is Epstein's treatment of those girls is the flip side of Harvey Weinstein's treatment of the women that he assaulted. He went after powerful, high-profile white women. If you look at the list of women, he barely looked at women who were darker or black. And many came forward to talk about what it was like to be in his circle and to be adjacent to it but not directly affected, he definitely wanted to put powerful women in what he thought was their appropriate place. And he saw powerful women as white women, and he targeted them. And even those women with that status and those supports and that level of cultural power could do nothing for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he proved his point then, right?
They both proved they're still proving their point.
That's a dark. This is very dark. So this is definitely a moment where we need the mic drop question to line things up. Yes. So one of the things that is why your book is so valuable right now is that we're hearing more and more people say that there's no male supremacy anymore. In fact, if anything, there's female supremacy. Mm-hmm. Women are in charge now. Yes. So on a lighter note, yes. So you saw violence and all those other things. If women were actually supreme, like what small stupid thing would be different?
I mean, what would be different? Small stupid things?
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't have sex segregated life. We wouldn't have boys who are scared to wear pink or to express fear or to cry. I mean, the thing about male supremacy, first and foremost, is that it dehumanizes boys the minute they're born.
Yes.
It strips them of a capacity to have emotional competence because it says all those feelings you're having, they make you vulnerable, they make you like girls, shut them down, turn them off, don't pay attention to them, and you get to be really angry or you get to be really fierce, but you don't get to be those other things. And then it goes straight from that into you will be objects of violence and perpetrators of violence. And that's pretty true by the time boys are 8 or 9. And we don't talk about that. And I just think that that is what male supremacy requires to sustain itself. And so I think that would be probably unlikely. And I don't even think there's something, I don't think a feminist world would have female supremacy because the entire framework of supremacy is anti-feminist.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I really want to urge people to think about is to refuse the premise of the argument. It is a ridiculous premise.
It is.
So just don't
premise.
go get a bowl of popcorn or something. Just say no. This is a ridiculous premise and it's not worth my time right now. Come back after you've read the following 30 books. I don't know what to say,
Yeah, I just want to end by asking you to hype your book, hype your work.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Well, first of all, it is called All We Want Is Everything, How We Dismantle Male Supremacy. That is not prescriptive. It's actually descriptive. It's like we are actually the revolution. We lead the most feminist lives. Even J.D. Vance lives a feminist life, really and truly. Like compared to even 40 years ago, we are living lives that are radically different from life 50 years ago. And the fact is, every generation of women for 100 years has had to create femininity anew, unlike the femininity probably that her mother or grandmothers embodied. And men can do it too. It's just that we keep socializing them to the past. They're socialized like their grandfathers, and girls are socialized like their granddaughters to envision lives ahead, And so anyway, this is what the book is about. And it's available anywhere you buy books. And there's an audio version. And I write a Substack called Unmanned, where I write about it.
My guest today has been Soraya Chemaly, and her book is All We Want Is Everything. Thank you one more time for being on Standing Room Only.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And don't forget to like and subscribe, and stick around for Encore. We have a song that's a little on topic. Hey folks, I'm coming to you from Latchkey Records. That is my partner's record store here in Philadelphia. Today's song recommendation is probably one you've heard about. Maybe you haven't listened to it, and I would really recommend that you listen to it because this album kicks ass. Lily Allen's new album, West End Girl, the song I'm picking from it is Madeline. It's one of those albums when you read about it, you might be like, how does this even work? Because as I'm sure you've already heard, the album is Lily Allen song by song in kind of chronological order describing the implosion of her marriage to actor David Harbour and accusations that he's cheating and gaslighting and just very abusive behavior. It is quite gossipy. It's quite a thrilling ride in that way. But what's cool about Lily Allen is that I don't think many other singers could do what she did, like literally just tell a story song by song by song. And in fact, I would say concept albums have been tried many times and they often fail. And even when they do succeed, like say something like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, it's because the concept collapses almost immediately. It might be like a subtle framing device, but rarely is it like a rock opera on the level of Lily Allen. But she has this unique ability to sing beautifully, and the lyrics are very discursive. They're like talking. They're just like telling you a story. She's able to somehow turn that into song lyrics that are incredibly effective, and then she sings them and adds a whole other layer. I mean, even back when she was first getting famous, a song like Fuck You is, if you kind of read the lyrics out loud, it doesn't necessarily feel like song lyrics, and yet when she sings them, it works perfectly. I don't know how she does it. It's amazing. So Madeline, Lily Allen, the album is West End Girl. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in our local communities, your family, your school, your neighborhood. If you have a story, go ahead and drop me a line, leave it in comments, and don't forget to subscribe.